Good evening and welcome. Now, in a first, the Civil Aviation Ministry of the Indian government has come up with regulations that aim to bar unruly passengers on board flights. Now, the draft regulations have classified unruly passengers into three categories. While Level 1 deal with physical gestures and disruptive behaviors, Level 2 deals with physical abuse and assault. More serious cases involving murderous assaults or damaging the operating system of the aircraft has been clubbed under Level 3. Miscreants on board flights can be barred from flying from a duration ranging from 3 months to over 2 years. Once the draft comes into effect from June this year, the proposal comes weeks after Shiv Sena lawmaker Ravindra Gaikwad assaulted an Air India staff and threatened him on board a flight.
There are very clear-cut provisions as to when such an incident happens, how the subsequent events will follow, and after this there is no need for anyone's intervention. And of course, at the end of the day, the judicial recourse is always open both to the airlines as well as to the passenger.
And WION's correspondent Sumit Chaturvedi spoke to India's Civil Aviation Minister Ashok Gajapati. Listen in.
Aggressive or the passengers will be penalized for some unruly behavior. So what is the objective of that first of all?
You see, now safety related is one angle. We are concerned with the safety related thing. Now, in certain airlines, you can say, so certain countries, they left it to the airlines, purely the airlines. This has to be evenly balanced. So, we are not keeping any person in mind. You're keeping incidents in mind when you're doing this, because safety is a prerequisite in aviation. Without safety, nothing will work. So safety and security will never be able to be compromised. So now what we are doing, we have, in our wisdom, we have drafted certain things. We're putting it in the public domain, getting their suggestions. We feel that because the interest level is much different now than what it was in 2014. So a lot of suggestions are expected. And we can work on those suggestions and come out with the thing finally and publish it.
So, but there's a drawback that if one airline has issued a no-fly list for a particular passenger, or if they've barred him, other airlines can still, make him fly. So, on the condition or the consideration of money, some airlines can still take unruly passengers. Don't you think this is a drawback which shouldn't have been there in the?
You see, there are two ways of interpreting that. One is that the airline where the incident has happened, other airlines, it's optional whether they can follow or not follow. But, so you see, anybody can make a mistake also. So we need to balance it. We can't just have an automatic ban throughout everything. Obviously, airlines will be interested in safety. They have a responsibility. So I guess they'll behave responsible.
All right, you were listening to India's Civil Aviation Minister Ashok Gajapati, who was talking to WION's correspondent Sumit Chaturvedi. Now, as you're watching these visuals on your screen to bring our viewers up to speed with what the government has decided. Now, in a first, the Civil Aviation Ministry has come up with regulations that aim to bar unruly passengers on board flights. The draft regulations have classified unruly passengers into three categories. Level 1 deals with physical gestures and disruptive behavior. Level 2 deals with physical abuse and assault. And Level 3 involves murderous assault or damaging the operating system of the aircraft. Now, these are the three categories contained or defined in the draft regulations formally announced by the Indian Civil Aviation Ministry earlier today. Now, miscreants on board flights can be barred from flying from a duration ranging from 3 months to more than 2 years once the draft comes into effect from June this year. Now, the proposal comes weeks after Shiv Sena lawmaker Ravindra Gaikwad assaulted an Air India staff and threatened him on board a flight to New Delhi. All right, I'm now joined by Tejas Shah, a former cabin crew member who joins us this evening from Mumbai. Good evening, Tejas. I want to begin by asking you, have you had a chance to look at the draft of the regulations as such? And if so, what are your first impressions after reading it?
See, I've not gone through the technical details as such, but as we see in the news and everything, the shocking thing was after, everything was on video, it was very shocking that there was a lot of pressure on Air India to take back Mr. Gaikwad. Like, it was quite shocking because the video which we all saw on social media,
right?
It was quite shocking, raising hands on a person who is a senior citizen and they're in the company for such a long time. So, it's rather saddening, like very sad, the situation that they've accommodated him again on Air India due to certain pressures.
Indeed, Tejas. Now, I'm just curious to ask you, why didn't we think of these new rules before? In other words, why did it take for us to wait for the incident involving this Shiv Sena MP to come up with this draft regulation?
Well, it's a very good question. They could have thought of such rules earlier. As a former cabin crew, I don't want to disclose the airlines that I used to fly for, but I have changed airlines, and in my second airline, there were rules in place, and the passenger behavior was like very much normal as compared to the first airline, Now, they in India, we should come up with certain rules, and these rules should be made aware to the citizens as well. And very important thing, what I feel is, they have not empowered our cabin crew enough to even know their basic rights. So most of the private carriers, the cabin crew don't know their rights, and they are rather scared to do anything to the customer or passenger, as you would call them, because they don't know what the management would do to them, Like, for example, even a government airline like Air India, the incident that took place, the cabin crew did whatever they could, but end of the day, what happened? He's back on flight, so you don't know what inquiry is going to follow you after an incident. So everybody is so scared. But if you know your rights, then you can take action appropriately.
Indeed. And Tejas, very quickly before we let you go, now I'm given to understand that the government has indicated that the private air carriers are free to choose or to implement or to draw upon this draft regulation and incorporate or implement them in their respective carriers. Now, how likely is it that the private airlines will indeed take a cue from these draft regulations and incorporate it either partially or fully in their respective airlines?
Well, keeping in mind the competition that is there internationally and within India, there are certain carriers, they would take a strong stand on it, but a better idea would be all the private carriers should get together and form a sort of a body which actually supports this law, and then something can be done about it, because a particular airline doing something about it and a B particular airline not doing something about it, there's a lot of discrepancy. So all the private carriers should, the main thing is come together and then take necessary, put forward certain things.
All right, you were listening to Tejas Shah, a former cabin crew member who was joining us and speaking to us live from Mumbai this evening. Thank you, Tejas, for sharing your thoughts with me on these draft regulations, which were announced earlier today in New Delhi.